Tonight's descent begins in the year 1554. It is morning, if one can call this cloying grey murk that seeps through the gaps in the shutters morning. The sun exists somewhere behind the fog and chimney soot, but you wouldn't know it by looking. The air smells of damp ashes, boiled onions, and something sweetly rotting in the thatch. Before we begin, please comment where you're watching from and what time it is. It's intriguing to see who's joining us from all around the world. You wake up in a Tudor bedchamber. Congratulations, you're alive. The mattress beneath you is stuffed with straw and something crunchier, possibly former straw. It hasn't been turned in months. Your back is damp, your feet are colder than memory, and the blanket wrapped around you is wool rough as bark, crawling with something that might have once been alive, but now just itches. You are neither noble nor peasant. You exist in that vague social pudding called the middling sort, a tradesman's family perhaps, not quite destitute, not quite safe. Your home has walls of wattle and daub, like a gingerbread house, left out in the rain and repaired by someone who never learned to measure. Your head aches, that might be from last night's ale, or the fumes, or the 6 hours of half-sleep spent listening to your father snore like a dying ox across the room. Everyone sleeps in the same chamber, even the child with the cough, especially the child with the cough. The floorboards groan when you move. Below you, the kitchen fire has gone out. You can feel it through your feet, nothing but cold. The rushes on the floor are damp with something unspoken. They were fresh once, 3 months ago. You're already late. The church bell tolls from across the village, a dull iron clang through the fog. Your first thought is not of God, but of bread. You will need to find some, preferably edible, preferably unbitten by rats, though in this century, that's considered a bold and unrealistic ambition. This is the Renaissance, a time of new ideas, old diseases, and fewer surviving children. You will not invent anything today. You will not read Latin. You will not attend court. You will simply try not to die, and already you're behind schedule. Your first mistake is standing up. The floor is splintered oak, uneven, slanted, cold. You step down onto it and immediately regret the decision. Your feet are bare. Your right heel lands in something slick. A puddle of last night's washwater, or possibly the cat's opinion on last night's pottage. Either way, it's cold and unwelcoming. The chamber pot in the corner is full, over full. It's topped with a small linen square to keep the smell at bay, which is laughably optimistic. The smell is winning. You pick it up carefully, arm extended like a bomb with a handle. You will empty it into the garden trench, which is generous. The trench is less garden, more a long, shallow monument to bodily despair. You open the door and step outside. The morning is wet, not raining precisely, just England's eternal mood. Mist seeps into your clothes, into your bones. The smell of chimneys and chicken dung follows you like a devoted hound. You pour out the contents of the pot and mutter something like a prayer. You don't believe it will help. But in the Renaissance, prayers are like salt. You throw them on everything, just in case. Back inside, the household is waking. Your mother stirs the pot by the hearth. It is not breakfast, not really. It is what remains of yesterday, plus hope. A thin gruel of barley leeks and mystery flecks, possibly onion, possibly rat. She hands you a bowl made of wood, worn soft by years of use and the occasional chew mark. The spoon is carved from a gnarled root. It's more decorative than effective. You eat anyway. The gruel is hot, which is its best feature. It coats your throat like warm paste. You chew twice. You swallow. You endure. The Renaissance is not a time of culinary delight. It is a time of chewing whatever didn't rot overnight. There is no sugar, no spice, not unless you're noble or criminally extravagant. The only thing you're allowed to taste is obligation. Someone coughs again. That child, the one who never quite stops coughing. You glance over. He's alive, for now. You eat in silence. It is not unpleasant. It is just life. Your meal finished, your stomach now vaguely warmed by the pottage slurry. It is time to get dressed. This process does not spark joy. There is no wardrobe, no chest of drawers, just a peg on the wall and a heap on the floor. Your clothes are the same ones you wore yesterday, and the day before that, and quite likely every day since the Queen last sneezed. You pull your shirt over your head. It is linen technically, though after years of wear, it feels more like stiff parchment. It crackles faintly as it slides over your skin, which is already itching from the chill and the lingering bite of last night's fleas. Over the shirt you don a doublet. It buttons unevenly and smells like old smoke and boiled wool, because it is made of boiled wool. It was once your uncle's, possibly while he was still alive. Your hose are patched, one leg darker than the other. They sag at the knees like exhausted opinions. You tie them with a bit of string and pretend it's fashion. Your shoes, if you're lucky, are made of leather. If you're less lucky, they are a dream you've been having for months. Today, they're missing. You find them eventually under the bench, stiff with yesterday's mud and regret. There are no socks, no undergarments, no clean, only layers and prayer. Outside, a neighbour passes by and nods. He is dressed the same way. Everyone is. The rich wear fur and embroidery. You wear the same wool until it remembers your shape. You scratch at your collarbone. Something moves. Possibly a louse. Possibly guilt. Either way, you ignore it. Cleanliness is a theory, one that the Renaissance is still debating. Loudly. With soap that doesn't lather and water that actively resents being used. You're now dressed for the day. You look like everyone else. You feel like no one in particular, which is the safest way to feel. The streets of your Tudor village are not streets in the modern sense. They are more like compacted intentions, worn by centuries of footsteps and softened by the leavings of everything that walks, crawls, or is hurled from an upper window. As you step outside, the morning mist clings to the uneven stones and rutted earth like a low-hanging curse. You do not walk so much as navigate, avoiding puddles of dubious origin, animal droppings with the stubborn optimism of freshness, and the occasional dead bird flattened into the muck with a kind of casual permanence. Your first task this morning is to visit the well. You bring a wooden bucket on a rope that was last repaired with something that might have once been string, or possibly just wishful thinking. The bucket creaks with every step, complaining as if it too regrets being alive today. The well is in the centre of town, surrounded by the timbered scowls of neighbouring buildings and a smell that can only be described as historical. It's a mixture of old smoke, new urine, and whatever happens when a dozen families forget whose turn it was to clean out the gutters. No one has cleaned out the gutters, not this year, possibly not since the Battle of Bosworth. The water from the well is cloudy, depending on the day, the rainfall, and who's died upstream. You try not to look too closely. You draw your bucket, dip it into the inky depths, and try not to think about the rat you saw floating there last week. You drink it anyway, boiled if time allows, unboiled if reality insists. You return home with the bucket sloshing against your leg. You're wet now, not soaked, just wet enough to remember that you will be cold later. You step back into your home, the threshold marked with a bit of rosemary, tied with string. It's meant to ward off plague. It doesn't. Inside, the child is still coughing. It's been 4 weeks now. You've stopped counting. Before work begins, your mother gestures to the laundry. Not to be washed. No, that would require too much water and not enough hands. But to be aired. A sort of theatrical gesture toward cleanliness. Shirts and shifts are hung on pegs near the hearth, not to dry but to forget. Lice are part of the ensemble. Everyone has them. Combs are rare, tweezers are rarer. Boiling is ideal, but fuel is precious. So you scratch. Everyone scratches. You can hear it at night, like insects rustling beneath a field of wool. Your sister, who is 11 and already being watched by neighbours for signs of womanhood, pulls a splinter from her foot and spits on it. The wound may fester. It may heal. The odds are roughly equal. There is no soap. Not as you would recognise it. A hard cake of tallow and ash sits on the shelf, more threatening than cleansing. It smells like burnt lard and failed dreams. Occasionally, you rub it on your hands. It leaves behind a film that makes you feel briefly heroic and then vaguely greasier. Bathing is for saints and nobles, or those with fevers, or those being prepared for burial. You have not bathed in 3 weeks. No one mentions it. No one notices. You once heard a man say that bathing lets sickness in through the pores. He said it with such conviction that no one argued. That man later died of a stomach ailment brought on by eating spoiled eel, but his theory lives on. A neighbour child runs past your door, barefoot and laughing. His face is smeared with soot. His tunic hangs from one shoulder like a defeated flag. He will likely be dead before he's 20, but for now he's laughing. You hear the church bell again. It marks the hour, or perhaps it marks a death, or a wedding, or a fire. It rings often and always with the same dull finality. You set down your water bucket. You scratch your scalp. You take a deep breath and regret it instantly. The day has officially begun. You are ready, or as ready as anyone in Tudor England ever is. Work, in the Renaissance, is not an occupation. It is a sentence. And you, dear sufferer of 16th century fortune, are somewhere near the bottom of the labour hierarchy. You are not a noble, not a merchant of silks, not a court musician plucking lutes for sour-faced dukes. You are a working soul, a tradesman's child, perhaps, or a hired hand in a profession that grinds slowly and spits out splinters. Today, like most days, you are called to assist your father in his trade. He is a tanner. This is unfortunate. Tanning hides in Tudor England is not merely unpleasant. It is an open challenge to the endurance of every human sense. It begins with raw animal skins. These are not pristine things, like the gleaming furs depicted in royal portraits. No, these hides arrive fresh from slaughterhouses, sometimes still steaming, always still reeking. The hair must be removed, the flesh scraped, the fat discarded, unless it can be boiled down for candles, in which case it will be stored in a barrel and left to sour until the stench becomes a family trait. Hair is loosened with lime water, a mixture so caustic it burns your hands if you forget the gloves you don't own. The hides are then plunged into a tanning solution made of oak bark and dog urine. Dog urine is preferred because of its acidity. Children are sometimes sent to collect it, going door to door with jugs and the humiliating phrase, "May I have your chamber pot, please?" The tanning pits are just beyond town. You arrive as the morning mist begins to lift and the smell begins to settle, thick and cloying, like rotting meat steeped in vinegar. The pits themselves are deep tubs of liquid misery. Your job is to stir the hides, with a stick if you're lucky, with your hands if the stick is missing. The stink clings. It penetrates your clothes, your hair, your teeth. No amount of herbs stuffed in your collar will protect you. Your eyes water constantly. Your throat burns. The older men joke about it. They say the smell builds character. They say their wives love it. They lie. Your hands are cracked. Your nails are rimmed with grime. You no longer notice the cuts. You only notice the ones that do not heal. These you watch carefully. Infection is a quiet, creeping thing. If red lines appear, if your knuckles swell, if you start to feel fevered, you say nothing. There is no doctor here, no surgeon. Only your uncle, with a dull knife, and the confidence of someone who once watched a barber drain an abscess. The work continues. The hides must be stirred, scraped. Hungarian scraped again. The leather will be used for shoes, belts, perhaps even armour. But for now, it is a burden. A stinking, dripping, fly-laden burden. The sun begins to rise higher. It is not warm, just bright enough to show you how stained your tunic has become. You have stepped in something. Again, a rat scurries across the beams. It pauses to stare at you. It looks better fed. You break for a meal, bread if there is any. It is hard and dry. You dip it in weak ale to soften it. The ale is safer than the well water, and just sour enough to mask the aftertaste of urine that now lives on your tongue. Someone nearby is retching. That's the apprentice who forgot to wear gloves yesterday. His hand is swollen to twice its size. He will be out of work by tomorrow, perhaps permanently. There are no sick days, only days when your spot is taken by someone still able to stand upright. By mid-afternoon, your arms ache, your lungs feel scorched. Your back has begun to hum with that familiar warning tone, fatigue approaching collapse. You push through it. Everyone does. The master tanner walks by, sniffs, nods in vague approval, and moves on. It is almost evening. Your shift is nearly over. All you have to do is survive it. By the time the tannery releases you, you are no longer a person. You are a mobile arrangement of aches and smells. Your knees creak like barn hinges. Your arms hang limp with the wet heaviness of overuse. You smell of decay, lime and labour, a human soup stock. You walk home slowly, past hedges that have seen better centuries, past windows shuttered against thieves' spirits, or simply the cold reality of evening. The cobblestones beneath your feet are damp again, whether from rain, spilled chamber pots, or a neighbour's indiscreet pig is anyone's guess. You arrive at your home, where the hearth has been rekindled. The smoke is thick and aromatic in a way that suggests something is burning. Possibly food, possibly part of the wall. Inside, the single room that houses your family is dim and loud. Children squabble. Someone is crying. An elder mutters quietly to themselves in the corner, chewing what looks like a rag soaked in broth. Dinner is not so much cooked as achieved. It is a stew again. Of course it is. The pot has not been emptied in weeks. Pottage, they call it, a dish both noun and verb, as it is as much a process as a meal. The same base stew, added to daily, with whatever can be scrounged, stretched, or imagined into edibility. Tonight's ingredients include a turnip, 3 leeks, something that used to be cabbage, a questionable onion, and a bone. The bone is pork, probably. There is no meat on it, but the memory lingers in the broth. It has been boiled so often it now floats with the confidence of a log that believes it is a canoe. You are handed a bowl. It is wooden, chipped at the rim, and still warm from someone else's lips. You ladle your portion with a spoon that has seen so much use it is nearly flat. The stew is warm. That is its greatest virtue. It is neither bland nor flavourful. It tastes like resignation, with a hint of boiled root. You chew the turnip thoughtfully. It squeaks. Bread is passed around. It is dark and heavy, more weapon than food. Rye, barley, acorns, whatever the miller had swept from his floor. It is cracked, hard and sullen. You dip it into the pottage to soften it. It resists, then relents. No one speaks. There is chewing, swallowing, the occasional cough. This is not a feast. It is a truce with hunger. Your younger brother eyes your bowl. He has finished his. He is still hungry. Everyone is always still hungry. A rare luxury tonight. A slice of cheese. Hard as slate, sharp as betrayal. Made weeks ago, possibly months. It smells of feet and ambition. You gnaw it with the side of your mouth that still has usable molars. Someone farts. No one comments. Such things are as common and unremarkable as the creak of the roof beam or the scratching of the rats overhead. The stew is finished. The bread is gone. You sit in the warmth of the hearth and listen to the wind pushing against the shutters. A lull descends. The children yawn. The elder is now asleep, still clutching the broth-soaked rag like a holy relic. You are full. Not satisfied, but full. And in the Renaissance, that is enough. After dinner, the room settles into that particular hush known only to exhausted bodies in shared spaces, where even breathing feels coordinated, and any unnecessary movement is viewed as treasonous. The fire cracks softly. Your limbs are sore. You feel every joint as if it were whispering its grievances one by one. You sit near the hearth, on the hard edge of a wooden stool that wobbles like it too, is tired of standing. Your father speaks at last. Not to you directly, but into the air, a half-formed memory about a man who once saw a painting. Not just any painting, he insists, a true painting. One brought by a travelling friar from London. It showed a woman with golden hair, dressed in blue that looked like water and silk at the same time. She stared with eyes that followed you. They followed him, your father says, with the quiet conviction of a man haunted by beauty he couldn't explain. You nod. You've never seen a painting like that. Your world is too low for art. The only paintings you've encountered are those in the chapel. Dark panels where saints bleed and angels float stiffly in the sky, all halos and warnings. The friar's painting, your father says, was different. Software alive. It didn't warn. It invited. It didn't command reverence. It offered silence, a kind of hush he hasn't felt since. He tells you the painter's name was foreign. Italian or Flemish, perhaps. All the good ones are. He doesn't remember it. He remembers only the colours. He says the woman's face looked real enough to speak. You imagine it now poorly. A woman, sure, in a blue gown. But what would it mean to you, really? You cannot read. You cannot write. Your understanding of the world comes through labour and weather, through smells and wounds, through which crops grow and which do not. Paintings, true paintings, are for the learned, the nobility, the clergy, those with enough time to sit still and look. You do not sit still unless you're too tired to stand. And even then, you are expected to listen, to stir, to sow, to pray. Still, something about your father's tone lingers, not the words, the hush in them, the way his voice dipped when he spoke of her eyes, as if, in that single glance from a painted woman, something cracked open that he's never managed to shut again. You ask if he saw it again. No, he says. It was taken back to London, hung in some hall behind a door, guarded by a man with velvet on his sleeves. Not for peasants, not for tradesmen, just for those whose collars stay white even in the rain. The hour grows late, not by the ticking of a clock, there is no clock, not in this house, but by the slow encroachment of cold into the bones of the walls, and the way your younger siblings have begun to nod off where they sit. Time in the Renaissance is marked by discomfort. When the fire dims and the toes go numb, that is evening. When the breath clouds in the air, that is night. Sleep comes slowly, or rather, it arrives in shifts, in pauses between noise and obligation. You do not go to bed in the way one might hope. You simply migrate toward the place where sleep happens. The bed is a single sagging frame of wood and straw, shared by many. You take your place, not chosen but understood. There is a rotation, older children against the wall, younger in the middle, grandfather by the hearth, where the heat will linger the longest and the rats come less often. The mattress smells of everything: sweat, smoke, old milk, damp straw. Once someone spilled lard. The stain remains, a ghost of last month's hunger. Fleas have built a civilization here. You scratch without thinking. They bite without mercy. Their rhythm is your lullaby. There are no sheets, just coarse wool blankets, heavy and always slightly moist. They trap warmth, yes, but also smells and stories you'd rather not revisit. You curl beneath them and try not to think of the cough you heard earlier, or the sore beneath your arm, or the chill creeping into your gut like a warning. There is no silence. Outside, the village shifts. Dogs bark. A distant owl questions your existence. Wood groans in its sleep. The wind weaves through the shutters and finds your neck every time you shift your head. Someone nearby snores wetly. Someone else mutters in their sleep. Someone, possibly your uncle, dreams of pigs again. He speaks to them in French, which he does not know while awake. You listen. You wait. There is no privacy, none at all. If someone needs to relieve themselves, they do so in the chamber pot, just feet away. If someone farts, it is a communal experience. If someone cries out from a dream, the rest of you inherit the echo. And still, sleep comes. Not gently, not peacefully, but in waves. 1 minute you're adjusting the straw beneath your hip. The next you are somewhere else, floating, dreaming perhaps, of warmth that lingers, or bread that does not break your teeth. Midnight comes with a shifting, a creak, a cough. Someone wakes to stoke the fire. Another shifts position. knee against your spine. You groan, you turn. First sleep is over. Second sleep begins. Yes, that is a thing. In the Renaissance, sleep is not one long stretch, but two, divided by a waking hour, where prayers are muttered, logs are turned, and sometimes secrets are shared. In noble homes, they read by candlelight. In homes like yours, you stare at the ceiling and hope no spiders descend. Your mother whispers a prayer for protection. It is too quiet to hear clearly, but you feel the shape of it in the air, like smoke from the hearth. Your father exhales loudly and settles again. You are awake, not for long. The fire crackles once more, then fades. Morning does not arrive, it seeps in. There is no alarm, no chirping phone, no gentle sunlight coaxing open your eyes like a friend. Morning in Tudor England is a damp hand across the face, the smell of ash and old onions in your nose, and the weight of another human's knee pressed into your ribs, because there are 6 of you in the bed, and no one has remembered how to sleep still. Your back is stiff, your neck clicks. The straw mattress has shifted again in the night, forming a sort of natural topography of pain. An angry hill beneath your spine, a sudden crater where your hip ought to rest. Someone is already awake. You can hear them, shuffling near the hearth, blowing gently on the coals that barely survived the night. The embers blink open like reluctant eyes. A stick crackles. A pot is placed back above the flame. The pottage lives again. There is no breakfast menu, no options. There is yesterday's stew, slightly congealed, and the heel of a bread loaf that could chip a tooth on a good day. It is neither hot nor cold. It is warm adjacent. That's enough. You do not rise quickly. You must first locate your limbs, hidden as they are beneath your siblings, under the blanket, pinned by weight and fatigue. You extricate yourself with the careful, miserable finesse of someone disarming a body trap. Your feet touch the floor. It is wet. Not puddled, just moist. The kind of dampness that implies moss may be forming somewhere under the rushes. You scratch your shin. Something bites you. Possibly a flea. Possibly memory. You stand. Your shirt clings where it should not. It has absorbed the ambient sweat of the night, yours and others. You tug it away from your skin and wince as the fabric pulls against last week's scratch, which has not healed and probably never will. You stretch cautiously. Your spine makes a sound like old wood. Your knees threaten you in a language you almost understand. The child with the cough is still coughing. Your uncle is muttering again. "Saint Apollonia preserve me," he says, touching his jaw. A tooth is going bad. You can smell it from across the room. He swears it will heal. He says this every day. The room is dark except for the orange of the fire and the blue of the window light, filtered through grime and breath and smoke, casting everything in a glow that is neither warm nor cold. Just ancient. You step outside. Not for air, there is no such thing as fresh air in this part of town, but for space. The lane is quiet. The sky is low. Mist hangs like forgotten laundry between the chimneys. A neighbour tosses a bucket of something from an upper window. It lands in the gutter with a wet thud. You do not look to see what it was, you already know. Somewhere down the lane the church bell tolls again. Matins, perhaps, or news, or someone has died. It tolls often. It's morning. Before the work, before the trudging, before the hauling of wood or tanning of hides or the relentless labour of staying not dead in Tudor England, there is one other thing. You need to relieve yourself. There is no bathroom. The term would earn a look of either confusion or deep suspicion. Bathing is rare. Rooms are for sleeping or dying in. Privacy is a concept reserved for the upper classes and the recently executed. You have 3 options. Option 1. The chamber pot. This is located in the corner of the room. It is a wide-mouthed vessel of clay, or, if you're lucky, pewter. It is, at this hour, full. Not dangerously, not rebelliously, but full enough that one wrong move could turn an act of necessity into a domestic incident. You approach it cautiously. It greets you with warmth of odour, not temperature. a meaty, familiar stench that is both intimate and horrifying. You do your business with the solemnity of a monk reciting a prayer over open flame. Then you cover the pot with a cloth, a gesture, not a solution. It will be emptied later, probably. Option 2, the privy. A short walk down the lane behind the house, shared with neighbours. It is a wooden structure, roughly the size and shape of a coffin stood on end. Inside is a bench with a hole, and below the hole is everything that has ever passed through the village's collective digestive systems since midsummer. Possibly before you open the creaking door. A swarm of flies greets you with the enthusiasm of unpaid debt collectors. The smell is legendary. The privy is poorly ventilated, leaning slightly to one side, and cobwebbed like a haunted pantry. You step inside. You brace. You balance. You regret everything. There is no paper. There are options. Leaves, cloth, moss, or the corner of your dignity. You choose the moss. It is cold and slightly too alive. You do not speak of this again. When finished, you return to the house, lighter but not in spirit. Option 3. The street. Popular among the very young, the very drunk, and the very desperate. Technically frowned upon, mostly ignored. In towns, waste is often thrown from windows with a shout of "Gardez l'eau," a holdover from French meaning "watch out for the water," though there is nothing watery about what follows. In narrow lanes, gutters run like open sewers. Children splash through them. Rats wade. The occasional chicken regards it as a buffet. In winter, it freezes. In summer, it bakes. You once saw a man slip on the frozen gutter and land in something that had no name, only consequence. He walked with a limp after that, and a smell. Back home, your mother is adding more water to the stew. It will be thinner today. You are not surprised. Your father has gone to fetch more firewood. Illegally. The nearby forest is owned by the local squire. Poaching wood is a crime. A hanging offence if someone is feeling theatrical. You begin your day with the taste of pottage and the memory of the privy. You do not speak of it. No one does, but everyone knows. And that is how the day begins. After the privy, after the pottage, after the scraping together of morning composure from a puddle of aches and steam, the village stirs in earnest. The sun has managed to climb above the thatched rooftops now, and the light has gone from pewter to something almost golden, if you squint through the smoke. Today, you are not tanning hides. Today, you have been summoned to the parish school. This is not a privilege. It is a test. Education in 16th century England is not a universal right. It is an accident of birth, proximity, and mood. If your father's trade is respectable enough, or if the local vicar owes him a favour, you might be sent, once or twice a week, to a damp, windowless room behind the church where a man with bad breath and worse eyesight attempts to cram Latin into your skull, using a stick. You carry a slate, a stub of chalk, and a chunk of stale bread to chew when the lessons grow too dry. You sit on a long bench beside boys who smell like you, of wood smoke and fear. The schoolroom is neither warm nor cheerful. The floor is bare, the windows are narrow slits covered in oiled cloth, letting in just enough light to make everything look miserable. The walls are hung with religious scenes, paintings of judgment, damnation, flaying, encouragement they call it. The master arrives. He is robed in wool. His breath smells of onions and sermon. He holds a stick carved from ash and polished smooth by decades of repetition. You do not wish to meet it, but you probably will. The lesson begins with recitation. You do not understand Latin, no one does, but that is not the point. You are not meant to understand. You are meant to memorize, to repeat, to endure. This is not learning, it is survival by syllable. Your voice joins the others in reading. Mistakes are met with correction. Corrections are met with the stick. You flinch preemptively. Next comes penmanship. The master passes around ink. It smells of rust and vinegar. The pens are made from sharpened reeds, or goose feathers. Your hands tremble as you dip and write. The ink bleeds. Your letters slouch like tired men. You write your name, slowly, badly. You are told it is incorrect. It always is. At midday, the lesson ends. You are not dismissed. You are released like a pressure valve. Your legs cramp as you stand. Your fingers are stained black. Your slate is smeared with confusion. You return home quietly. No one asks what you learned. You would not know how to answer. There will be no certificate, no graduation, no formal achievements. If you're lucky, you will retain enough knowledge to read signs, to sign your name, to recognize the Psalms as something more than noise. More likely, you will forget most of it by Michaelmas. But for now, you are educated, and that will have to do. Your brief foray into education behind you, you return home through the narrow lane, dodging carts and the occasional goose, hoping for warmth, for something soft, for a moment of peace you find none. What you find is your shirt clinging to your back like a damp insult. The collar has stiffened with sweat and smoke. It scratches with every movement. A piece of straw pokes out from the seam under your arm, lodged there during last night's attempt at sleep, now fused to the linen like it was woven in on purpose. You pluck it free. It leaves a red line. Your doublet, patched, faded, 3 generations out of fashion, is beginning to fray at the elbows. You can't take it off. Not because of modesty, but because you only have one. You own in total 2 shirts, 1 pair of hose, and 1 pair of shoes that should have been retired when the last monarch died. Washing clothes is rare. The process is biblical in scale. Water must be fetched, heated, strained. Soap, if you have any, is made of ash and fat. Your mother boils shirts in a copper pot when she can spare the fuel, which is seldom. The scent it produces is memorable, a blend of lie, misery, and last week's skin. So most things don't get washed, they get aired, hung by the fire or waved in front of the window like a surrender flag. Sometimes rubbed with rosemary or lavender to fool the nose, but never truly clean. You scratch again. Not idly, necessarily. The lice have returned. They never really leave. They take up residence in the seams, in the folds, in your scalp. You've seen your sister comb them from her hair with a knife. You've seen your father burn his shirt over the fire to drive them out, only to discover they return faster than the wool can be patched. There are remedies. The neighbour once buried her shift in the snow. Another soaks her linens in vinegar and hope. A third uses mercury, which may work, though it may also kill her. Most people simply learn to live with the itching. It becomes part of the rhythm of life, like chewing or prayer. You check the cuffs of your hose, stiff, rubbed with filth from work. The knees have begun to shine from use. You stretch them over your calves and tie them with worn laces that were once white long ago. Now they are the colour of compromise. In noble homes, clothes are a language. Velvet and fur, slashed sleeves, embroidery in gold thread. In yours, they are a warning. They tell the world that you're poor, cold, and not to be asked for anything expensive. A man walks past in a cape trimmed with fox fur. He reeks of clove oil and security. He does not glance your way. You are a smudge in his day. You consider your shoes again. One sole is loose. You step carefully now, favouring the heel. If it breaks, you will be barefoot. And the lane is unforgiving, filled with sharp stones, old nails, and the whisper of tetanus. You sigh. You adjust your collar. The itching resumes. There is no comfort here, only cloth that remembers the last person who wore it, and bites that remind you you're still alive. It is market day, not a grand event, not a bustling affair of wagons and wealth and shouting tradesmen in puffed sleeves. No, this is a modest weekly clutter of humans and hope, stretched thin across the churchyard and muddy green at the village edge. You are sent with a task, not money. You don't have that. You carry a basket and 2 eggs, one from the hen that still lays, one that may or may not be yesterday's offering. Your mother wrapped them in straw. She told you not to drop them. You nod, though everyone knows the straw won't help if the road decides otherwise. The path to the market is short but treacherous. Mud, cart ruts, one particularly aggressive goose. You hold your basket high, like a pilgrim carrying relics. When you arrive, The noise greets you first. Voices raised, but not loud. More like persistent murmuring, a drone of negotiation and accusation, and the sound of someone insisting their turnips are not spoiled, they are merely robust. Stools are tables, or boxes, or more often blankets on the ground. There are cabbages with too much personality, onions that could serve as weapons, and small apples bruised like ancient knees. You pass a boy with a dead hare on a string. He is trying to trade it for boots. He will not succeed. The air is thick with smells, unwashed bodies, overripe fruit, distant firewood, and somewhere, lavender. One of the apothecary's daughters is selling bundles. She stares at you like she knows you can't afford it. She is correct. Your goal is flour. Your mother gave you a name, Martha, the miller's cousin. She owes a favour, or once took pity, or perhaps she lost a bet. Either way, you find her near the ale stand, surrounded by sacks of powder that look like dreams waiting to collapse. She eyes your eggs. One is deemed acceptable. The other she sets aside with a sniff. In exchange, she gives you a small bag of barley flour. Coarse, heavy, slightly damp. You say thank you. She says nothing. You pass a man selling books. He wears spectacles. His cart is filled with words you cannot read. The covers are worn. One has a picture, an angel perhaps, or a very tired bird. He looks at you with a kind smile. You look away. Reading is for those who don't work with their hands. Nearby, a preacher shouts about sin. He waves a Bible, or maybe just a large ledger. People pretend not to hear him. He continues anyway. A woman stirs a pot of soup by the lane. She's charging a penny for a cup. You do not have a penny. You do not ask what's in it. The smell says meat. The colour says regret. You pass a pig on a rope. It looks at you with the kind of intelligence that makes you uncomfortable. Someone's child is missing. Someone else's child is found. They were never the same child. You stop at a cloth seller, just to look. The fabrics are second-hand, some third-hand. A square of linen catches your eye. It has flowers embroidered at the edges. Clumsy, bright, faded. Your fingers itch to touch it. The woman behind the table sees you hesitate. She says, 2 pennies. You do not have 2 pennies, you nod. You walk away. The market will not remember you, but you will remember it. The smells, the noise, the way your stomach ached at the scent of sweetbread. You return home with the flour. Your mother nods. It is enough, not good, just enough. The sun is lower now, not setting, just repositioning, tilting the light so it spills sideways through the village, catching on roof edges and broken window panes, casting the road in long, theatrical shadows. The kind that make even small things look ominous. You are home again. The house, as ever, is the same smoke curling from the crooked chimney, the same crooked door that doesn't close properly unless kicked, the same smell, a gentle war between damp wool, ash, and something that has been fermenting under the bench for 3 days. Your mother is kneading dough. The flour you brought was enough, just barely, to make a rough loaf. It will be flat, tough, and possibly flecked with dirt, but it will be bread. And bread is everything. You are sent to fetch firewood. This is not a small task. Firewood is not easily found. The forests are owned by the squire, by the church, by people who do not fetch their own wood. Gathering fallen branches is tolerated only when no one is looking. You've heard of boys caught with bundles under their arms, fined or whipped or once disappeared. You go anyway. Your path is familiar. Down the lane, past the well, into the brush, where the trees lean like conspirators. You keep your eyes low. You gather twigs, bits of bark, a broken branch softened by moss and rot. It will burn poorly, but it will burn. The forest is quiet, not peaceful, just quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you listen for twigs breaking that are not your own. You do not linger. Back home, you add your bundle to the hearth. Your mother nods. She's heating water now. Not for washing, for soup. The leftover pottage thinned again, stretched to feed 7. It smells edible. That's the best you can hope for. You sit by the fire. It does not warm you, not really, but it tells you you're not alone. The others gather one by one as dust creeps in like mould. And then the rats. You hear them first, in the thatch above, scratching, scurrying, rearranging their invisible lives just above your heads. They live in the roof. Sometimes they fall through. Once one landed in the soup. Your mother did not scream. She just threw the pot out the door, said a prayer, and started over. The rats are fat this year. That is bad news. Fat rats mean lean humans. You try to ignore them, you fail. Someone bangs the hearth with a stick, a futile gesture. The rats wait, they always wait. Dinner is served, bread, soup, silence. Your youngest brother sneezes into the stew. No one mentions it. Outside, night has fully arrived. It is black and total, the kind of dark that feels like a shut door. You close the shutters, you latch the door. Not to keep anything out, just to pretend that's possible. You sit by the fire, the light flickers across your mother's face. She looks tired. She always looks tired. You scratch your scalp. You hear a rat thump softly in the rafters. You pretend not to hear it. The room is smoky, the walls sweat. The wind howls through the chinks, like it knows something you don't. You chew your bread, and you wait for the next thing to go wrong. It begins with a cough, a small thing, barely audible over the crackling fire and the muted chewing of stale bread. Your brother, the youngest, the one with the thin wrists and the always damp nose, lets out a wheeze. Not the first, not even the third. But this one lingers, it clings, it ends with a sharp inhale and a look on his face, like he's just tasted fear. No one says anything, because saying something makes it real. Your mother pours more soup. Your father stares into the fire. The rest of you shift slightly, subtly, just enough to pretend you didn't hear. It's winter. Of course he's coughing. Everyone coughs in winter, but the room knows. It always does. There is no doctor to call, not here, not for people like you. The nearest physician lives 3 villages away and charges in coin, not kindness. Even if you could afford him, he would be of limited use. Most physicians diagnose by humours, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. Balancing them often involves leeches, or bleeding, or a reassuring lie followed by a polite disappearance. Your grandmother, when she was alive, believed in poultices, mustard seeds and pig fat, slapped onto the chest like an apology. She also believed in prayer. She is now dead. The child coughs again. This time, it rattles. You look at the hearth. You consider the pot of water. Warmth is medicine, they say. So is garlic if you have it. You do not. Your mother places a rag on his chest. She murmurs a verse. Not from the Bible, but from memory. Something her mother said once during a fever. It sounds like nonsense, but it is better than silence. Outside, the wind picks up. The shutter flaps. The room grows colder, even with the fire. You press your back against the wall, feeling the damp through your tunic. Your shoulder itches, you scratch. You listen to the wheezing. There is a rule, unspoken but understood. If the fever breaks by dawn, he might live. If it does not, you do not finish the thought. You do not have time for grief. Not here, not in Tudor England. Grief is a luxury. So is time. You feed the fire. You fetch the last scrap of fabric from the chest and place it over his legs. You lie back down in your shared bed. Eyes open, ears alert. The fire burns low. The child coughs again. You count the breaths between. And wait. You do not sleep. Not truly. You lie in a posture that mimics rest. Your body wrapped in the shared blanket. Your head turned toward the fire. But your ears are wide open, stretched taut like sails before a storm. The room is dark now, save for the dying orange glow of the embers, and the faint halo around the shutter where moonlight leaks like a secret. The child wheezes beside you. It is softer now, or perhaps more tired. Each breath sounds like it's searching for permission. Everyone else pretends to sleep. They are still. Their backs rise and fall in that slow, resigned rhythm of exhaustion. But they hear it too. You all hear it. Because when sickness enters the house, it does not knock. It just settles in. You remember last winter, the girl down the lane, Agnes? She had the same cough. It started on a Tuesday. By Sunday her father was carving a box behind the cottage, muttering the Lord's Prayer under his breath with every stroke of the saw. The village priest says illness is a test, that suffering is a pathway to grace, but his fingers are fat with rings, and he sleeps alone in a stone house with a fire that never dies. You shift slightly. The straw beneath you rustles like old parchment. The mattress sighs. You stare at the ceiling. The rats above have quieted, perhaps out of respect, or perhaps because they're listening too. Your hands ache, not from labour today, but from helplessness. There is nothing to do but wait. You cannot fetch medicine. You cannot pray louder. You cannot force air into someone else's lungs. So you watch the fire. You feed it small twigs from the pile beside the hearth. Each one snaps like brittle bones. The flame flutters, not grateful, not angry, just present. You wish you could breathe warmth into him, into the room, into this whole crumbling century. But your breath is just fog in the air, cold, fleeting. The child stirs. Your mother murmurs something, a lullaby from her own childhood. Her voice is rough. She sounds older than she did yesterday. Your father turns over. His back remains a wall, stoic, immovable. There is no clock, but you count the time anyway. By breaths, by coughs, by the slow settling of the fire into ash. Eventually, morning will come. Or it won't. You do not know what this night will take from you. You only know it will take something. That's what nights do here. They gather their tax from the living, quietly, and leave no receipt. The sky begins to lighten, not with colour. There is no pink, no gold, no dramatic rays slicing through the mist like a revelation. Just a softening of the dark, a greying of the world, as if someone has washed the blackness in lye and left it out to dry. You are already awake, or rather, you never quite slept. The hearth is nearly out. A red glow hides under a skin of ash, waiting for the prod of labour. Your mother is already up, crouched beside it with a stick in one hand and the other resting gently on your brother's forehead. Her expression says everything. No worse, no better, still here. You rise slowly, your joints creaking in protest. You stretch, and something in your spine pops like a curse. Your feet meet the floor, cold and damp. You step around your uncle, who mumbles in his sleep about apples or angels, you can't tell which, and make your way to the bucket. The chamber pot was filled in the night. You take it outside. The village is quiet. Just a few figures moving slowly in the fog, like shadows pretending to be people. Smoke curls from a few chimneys. A dog limps across the lane. Somewhere, a rooster cries with the desperation of a creature that knows its purpose and resents it. You empty the pot into the trench behind the house. The smell punches you in the nose. Your stomach lurches, but you win the argument. There is no time for nausea. You return inside and help with the morning fire. Twigs first, then splinters, then one decent log from the hoarded pile. The flames return slowly, crawling their way up the wood as if they, too, are reluctant. Your brother is awake now. His eyes are glassy. His breath is shallow. But he smiles at you. It is a small thing, a terrible thing, because it means he still knows you, and knowing is usually the last thing to go. Breakfast is yesterday's bread, toasted slightly on the hearth. It is hard, dry, and tastes faintly of smoke and last week. Your mother cuts it into thin slices and gives the largest to your brother. You all watch to see if he eats it. He does. You pretend this means something. Outside, the village begins its routines again. A man hauls a dead pig past your window. A girl sweeps straw into a pile only to have the wind scatter it again. A neighbour sharpens a hoe. A chicken chases a child who probably deserves it. Life inconveniently continues. There is no pause for illness, no sympathy in the schedule. The sun will rise regardless. The work will not wait. Your mother tells you to fetch water. You nod. The day begins again. And that's your life in the Renaissance. Now let's drift off to some mysteries and stories. In the eastern English village of Woolpit, long before it was anything more than a cluster of fields and poorly kept secrets, a pair of children were found near the edge of a pit. a deep trench dug for trapping wolves. Though by the mid-16th century, there were no wolves left to trap. They were siblings by most accounts, a girl and a boy, both young, both silent, both green, yes, green. Their skin bore a pallor not of illness, nor of bruising, but of chlorophyll, as if they had been grown rather than born. Pea green, leaf green, a shade that did not belong on human skin, and yet there it was, stubborn and unsettling. The villagers, being of strong constitution and stronger superstition, did not scream. They did what people in rural England always did when faced with the incomprehensible. They brought food, bread was offered, the children refused it, meat, cheese, milk, all refused, until by accident or divine suggestion someone handed them raw broad beans, still in their pods. That they ate, ravenously. They spoke a language no one knew, not French, not Flemish, not even the slurred hybrid dialects of the fens. It had rhythm, but no pattern, syllables stacked like mismatched bricks. The villagers, being villagers, decided this was probably fine. They assigned the children to the care of a widow, because that's what one did with strays, and continued on with their ploughing. Over time the children adapted. The boy, however, did not thrive. He sickened. He died. The cause was never clear. He simply faded, like fog in the sunlight. The girl lived. Her green hue began to fade. Eventually she learned enough English to answer the questions that hung over her head like crows. Where had they come from? Who were they? What were they? She said they came from a land of perpetual twilight. She said everything there was green, plants, animals, people. She said they'd been tending their father's flock, had heard a bell, had followed it into a tunnel, and emerged in Woolpit, blinded by the sun. She said she didn't know how to return. She lived a quiet life after that, took a local husband, worked in the fields, had children of her own, all of them distinctly pink, but the questions never faded. Was it a story? A myth grown from hunger and hallucination? A metaphor for famine, for difference, for the foreign? Or was it something else? The Tudor records mention it only briefly. A line here, a note there. Children of peculiar hue. Speech unknown. Affection for beans. The pit they were found near still exists in some form. Grass grows over it now. The village is quiet. No green children have returned. But sometimes when the wind comes from the east and the bells ring from the church no one remembers building, people say you can hear something, not quite crying, not quite singing, something in a language no one speaks anymore. And no one asks questions about the beans, not anymore. In the year 1583, within the dense stone bones of Oxford's oldest colleges, a man named Thomas Lye vanished. He was not a sorcerer, not a noble, not a poet known for dangerous ideas. He was a cartographer, a map maker. He lived in a rented room on the top floor of a narrow gabled building along Holywell Street, once called Hellwell Street, though no one could remember why. The room was small, one window, one desk, one bed, and shelves, endless shelves, stuffed with maps, letters, navigational charts, sketches of shorelines he had never seen. He was obsessed with borders. His students noted this with some amusement. Thomas Lye did not care about names or cities or the colour one nation used to claim another. He cared only for the edges, where the land gave way to water, where fields became forest, where roads simply stopped. One student said Lye once spent 3 days staring at a map of the Suffolk coast because he didn't believe the beach ended where the cartographer claimed. He insisted there had to be something beyond the dunes, something unmapped. One November morning, he locked his door from the inside and never came out. His students knocked, waited, knocked again. No answer. When the landlord forced the door, they found the fire still warm, a half-eaten pear on the table, and Thomas Lye's maps scattered across the floor like a spilled language. But no Thomas Lye, no broken window, no disturbed dust, no footprints. The door had remained locked from within. The room was 3 floors above the ground. No one could explain it. Some suggested madness, that he had leapt, perhaps, in the night, and the body had been taken by animals or opportunists. Others suggested foul play, though there was no sign of struggle, no blood, no item missing except the man himself. But those who knew him best, his students, his colleagues, the maid who brought his bread and dried apples each week, said it didn't feel like violence. It felt like departure. When it was finally reopened, they found one wall scraped bare. The plaster had been peeled away with fingernails or knife tips, exposing a pattern beneath. Not Latin, not Greek, not any alphabet anyone recognised. Just a ring of symbols, drawn in charcoal and ink, and what looked, uncomfortably, like iron filings. They whitewashed the wall, burned the desk, reassigned the room to a scholar of theology who never slept there more than once. The records of Thomas Lye stop in 1583. No burial, no declaration of death. Just one final unfinished map found on his desk of the English coastline, stretching outward into an unnamed sea. Where the paper ends, the ink keeps going. Just lines faint and trembling, as if someone kept drawing, even after the edge. In the Renaissance there were books about saints and sins, books about plants and poisons, books about the right shape of a bishop's hat and the proper order of a goat's innards, books in Latin, Greek, Hebrew and, occasionally, English. But then there was the book, the one with no name. Today it is called the Voynich manuscript. Not because of its author, it has none, but because of the man who bought it from a Jesuit library centuries later, opened it, and quietly panicked. It is written in a language that does not exist. Its pages are made of fine vellum, calfskin, smooth and pale, likely prepared in the early 15th century, perhaps earlier. The ink has not faded. The script is fluid, consistent, elegant, and entirely unreadable. The characters resemble letters, but they are not Latin, nor Arabic, nor Coptic, nor even the invented gibberish of a madman's fevered dreams. Each letter curves with intent. Each word follows another with structure, grammar, logic. But no one understands it. And oh, the drawings. There are plants, dozens of them, sketched with delicate precision. None of them exist, not one. There are bathing women, naked, tangled in green tubes, half submerged in star-shaped pools, surrounded by what looks like plumbing, but bleeds like roots. They smile. They do not explain themselves. There are diagrams, cosmic wheels, celestial clocks, tangled loops of numbers and stars. They hint at astronomy, alchemy, biology, and then swerve into abstraction. Spirals that go nowhere, calendars that mark nothing. The book appears to be divided into sections: herbal, astronomical, anatomical, pharmaceutical. But these are guesses, because it cannot be read. Over the centuries it has passed through many hands. A Habsburg emperor tried to decode it and failed. A Jesuit scholar attempted to burn it but couldn't bring himself to do it. Even now, computers cannot crack it. The patterns are real. The language obeys statistical laws of human writing, but it matches no known tongue. No cipher, no forgery. Some believe it is an elaborate joke, a medieval hoax, but hoaxes do not hold internal linguistic consistency across hundreds of pages. Hoaxes do not include entire working systems of grammar and syntax in an unknown tongue. Hoaxes don't take 40 years of someone's life to finish. The manuscript remains, unread, undefeated, alive. Stored now in Yale's Beinecker Library, it sits in a glass box, climate-controlled, lit with reverence. Scholars still visit. They take notes, they argue, they draw new comparisons, they leave exhausted. The book remains unmoved, unreadable, and yet readable. Because deep down, it feels like it makes sense, like if you stared long enough, the letters might rearrange themselves into something you once knew. Like a dream you almost remembered. Like a language you spoke as a child, before anyone told you how words were supposed to work. And when people walk away from the Voynich manuscript, they do so slowly, not because it frightens them, but because it knows something. In the early Renaissance, books were copied by hand, but that's not what makes it infamous. What makes it infamous is what's on page 577. A portrait, not of a saint, but of the devil. A full page, alone, staring straight out with wide, pale eyes and a grin that has too many teeth, and none at all. His fingers are long, curved, clawed. His tongue lolls out lazily, like he knows something about you haven't admitted yet. He is framed by two empty towers. No other figures appear. The monk who wrote the codex, if indeed it was only one, left no name. Legend says it was created in a single night. And then there was Codex Gigas, the giant book. Nearly 3 feet tall, bound in leather stretched from 100 animals, it weighs over 165 pounds. Its pages, made from the skins of donkeys, many donkeys, contain the entire Latin Bible, along with medical texts, historical records, spells and penitential prayers. That a monk broke his vows and was condemned to be sealed alive within the monastery walls. To avoid the sentence, he promised to create a book containing all human knowledge. In one night, as midnight approached, realizing the task was impossible, he prayed, not to God, but to something else, something that answered. The book was finished by dawn. It's too neat, too uniform, every letter perfectly formed, as if by the same hand, unchanging for hundreds of pages. The devil's portrait is the only illustration not accompanied by a scripture or caption. Scholars will tell you this is coincidence, artistic license, symbolism perhaps. But others say the book changes, that readers feel watched, that page 577 always opens more easily, and that the devil's smile grows slightly wider each time you return. Today, the Codex Gigas is kept in the National Library of Sweden, encased, sealed, but not unread. It whispers through time, and somewhere that monk, if he ever lived, is still listening. Now let us shift our focus from cryptic books to the people who commissioned them, feared them, or ordered them burned. We will spend some time now with the kings and queens of Renaissance Europe, not in triumph, but in the unlit corridors behind the throne, where paranoia, illness, rituals and power uneasily cohabited. Henry VIII, born the second son of Henry VII, was not meant to rule. That was Arthur's burden, his sickly, solemn brother, married off to Catherine of Aragon at 15, dead at 16. It should have been a tragedy, and it was in private, but in public it opened the throne. Henry was 17 when he inherited the crown. He was radiant. He was exactly what a Renaissance king was supposed to be. Tall, lithe, golden-haired, and fluent in the languages of war, scripture, and seduction. He could quote Aquinas and then wrestle his courtiers to the ground. He could dance for hours sweatless. He wrote poetry, composed music. He jousted, painted, debated. People didn't just admire him, they adored him. Ambassadors wrote letters home about the handsomest prince in Christendom. His courtiers mimicked his laugh. His tailor grew wealthy from mimicking the curve of his shoulders in doublet after doublet. When he walked into a room, people exhaled prayers they hadn't realized they were holding. He married Catherine, his brother's widow. It was a political arrangement, but also a gesture of continuity. He called her his rose without a thorn. They prayed together, dined together. For a while they were happy, and then the miscarriages began. One by one, each more devastating than the last. A daughter Mary survived, but she was not a son, and Henry wanted a son more than he wanted anything else in the world. Not for sentiment, for permanence, for the continuity of his name, his crown, his shape pressed into the future like a seal in wax. He tried to hide his disappointment. At first, but Catherine aged. Her skin lost its bloom. Her body weakened. He looked elsewhere. Anne Boleyn. Anne was not beautiful in the traditional way. She had clever eyes, a long neck, a sharp wit sharpened further by time spent in the French court. She wore her ambition like perfume, unapologetically. Henry pursued her with the energy of a man who had never been told no. But Anne did say no, not directly, just not yes. It drove him mad with desire. He wrote her letters, desperate, burning things that bled through the page with longing and frustration. He promised her everything. She asked for proof, so he began to undo the kingdom. To annul his marriage, he needed the Pope. The Pope refused. Henry interpreted that as betrayal, so he pulled England away from Rome. Quietly at first, then not. He declared himself head of the Church of England. Priests swore loyalty to him. Monasteries were emptied, altars stripped, land confiscated, and when people protested, they vanished. Anne became queen. Briefly, she bore him a daughter, Elizabeth, bright-eyed, sharp-tongued from the crib, but no son. And Anne, like Catherine before her, grew tired, grew weepy, grew inconvenient. The love soured, the court turned, whispers grew, and so Henry listened. A charge of adultery, incest, treason, her own brother, her own friends. Anne was beheaded on a cool morning in May. Henry did not attend. He was hunting by afternoon. That was the second wife. There would be 4 more, but the cracks had begun. The leg injury came next. It happened during a joust. January 1536, Greenwich. Henry was 44. Still powerful, still respected, but no longer adored. The gold of his youth had dulled into iron. His shoulders had widened, his waist had thickened. He sweated more, smiled less. But when he entered the lists, armoured, mounted, magnificent, he still looked the part. Until the horse fell. It rolled over him. For 2 hours he was unconscious. Those present thought him dead. He awoke dazed, bruised, but alive, mostly. What they didn't know was that the fall had reopened an old wound in his leg, a wound that would never properly heal. A deep lesion, slow to drain, slower to close. It ulcerated, it stank, it refused to be forgotten, and it changed him. Pain does that. Henry, once thoughtful, became impulsive. Once generous, he grew suspicious. He shouted more, trusted less, ate constantly, as though meals could replace sleep. The ulcer needed draining. Physicians used silver tubes, poultices of honey and lard. Hot irons, nothing worked. His courtiers began to flinch at the smell before he entered the room. Portraits from this period are famously inaccurate. They show a man still virile, still in command. But painters were told what to paint and what not to. No one painted the wound. No one painted the sweat, the swelling, the rage that bloomed behind his eyes like a second darker crown. Henry's court shifted. Where once there had been music, now there were whispers. He installed listening holes in the palace walls, spies in every chamber. People were arrested for sighs, for dreams, for having the wrong friends. He had Thomas More, his once beloved counsellor, beheaded. More had refused to recognise Anne Boleyn as queen. The executioner begged for forgiveness. More gave it. Henry did not. He married again, Jane Seymour, the quiet one, the good one. She gave him a son, Edward. Then she died of childbed fever, her belly still bruised from the birth. Henry wore black for months. He called her his true wife. He would be buried beside her. But in the meantime, he kept marrying. Anne of Cleves, dismissed on sight, he called her the Flanders mare. Unkindly, she outlived them all. Then Catherine Howard, young, beautiful, reckless. She flirted. She wrote letters. She was executed. He called for mercy, briefly, then did not grant it. Finally, Catherine Parr, patient, educated, careful, she survived. By now Henry was enormous. He wore armour with built-in pulleys. Servants rolled him between rooms. His legs cracked. His breath came in wheezes. The ulcer bled through his bandages and into the floorboards. Ambassadors described him as majestic. But their letters home smelled of lye and incense. They were trying to forget what they had seen. By the end, Henry could no longer walk. His last will named Edward as heir, then Mary, then Elizabeth, the 3 children of 3 doomed mothers. He died in 1547, swollen, silent. The coffin burst before burial. The rot at last free. When Henry VIII died, England exhaled. Not in joy, and not quite in grief, but in a long, confused wheeze of uncertain relief. The man who had ruled for 38 years left behind no one who resembled him, only ruins in his shape, broken monasteries, 1,000 widows, 3 royal children raised on suspicion, and a court that had learned to keep its eyes low and its prayers vague. Even his funeral was uneasy. The procession was enormous. A vast train of nobles, clerics, soldiers, and servants marching behind the weight of his body, as if trying to carry not a man, but a regime. The coffin, too long delayed, too heavy, cracked during transport. It leaked onto the flagstones. One writer noted with cautious vagueness that the dogs licked the floor behind him. The servants who witnessed it said nothing. One might imagine them crossing themselves, or perhaps just looking away. He was buried beside Jane Seymour, the wife who had given him his son. She had lasted just long enough to die ideal. No grand monument was built. His tomb was left incomplete. The man who had reshaped England with iron and ink now lay beneath the earth in silence. But he never truly left, not entirely, because fear has a long half-life. His son Edward, sickly and pale, ruled briefly, always watched, always weighing his every gesture against what his father would have done. His daughter Mary ruled next. She tried to stitch the country back into Catholicism with a needle dipped in fire. Heretics burned. Bishops wept. The people remembered the smell of their neighbours and turned their collars against the wind. Then came Elizabeth, the red-haired daughter of the beheaded queen. She ruled the longest, she smiled the widest, but she never married. Some said she loved England too much to share it. Others said she knew better than to trust anyone with a crown, having seen how easily heads rolled. In private, she kept her mother's ring. She never spoke of her father, but she kept his portraits clean. The court itself changed. The palaces echoed differently. No one argued with the monarch in public. Not anymore. They had learned that a sigh could become a trial, that a rumour could become a scaffold, that beneath the ermine and velvet there was always the possibility of blood. And the ulcer, though buried, lived on in metaphor. Every ruler after Henry ruled with one eye on the throne and the other on their own body, wondering when it too might turn against them. He had set the precedent that power could be reshaped by force, that the church could be silenced, that love was negotiable, that law was optional, that kings did not need to be right, only louder. In the end, Henry VIII did not leave peace. He left inheritance, of fear, of tradition twisted into power, of wounds that never quite healed. With Henry VIII's story closed like the lid of a cracked coffin, we now shift our gaze to another monarch, whose reign was shaped not by ulcers or wives but by whispers and silences, masks and fires. His son, Edward VI, the boy king. Edward was 9 when he became king. 9. An age when most children still believe in monsters under the bed. Edward was handed a crown heavy enough to snap the neck of a grown man. And in a way, it did. Just not his. He was the only legitimate son of Henry VIII, the child born of Jane Seymour, the wife who died before she could displease, England's long-awaited male heir, and, as it turned out, its most fragile. Edward was thin, pale and clever. His tutors described him as brilliant. He could translate Latin before he had his second adult tooth. He took notes in Greek. He wrote essays on theology, and yet he was always distant, like a candle burning behind a sheet of glass. His court was not really his. Power belonged to the men around him. First his uncle, Edward Seymour, Lord Protector, and then John Dudley, Duke of Northumberland. They ruled in his name. They passed laws, reformed churches, burned books, beheaded rivals, and Edward wrote in his diary. Brief entries, dry, unemotional. Today the Duke of Somerset was executed. He made a good end. That was all. He treated executions the way one might describe pruning a garden. Not cruel, just procedural. Like his father, he believed in order. Unlike his father, he believed in purity. Edward was a reformer. He tore down what little Catholicism remained. He banned altars, smashed stained glass, declared that priests must marry, must preach in English, must forget Rome entirely. He commissioned prayer books, full of plain words and plainer doctrines. He believed faith should be clean, and yet his own body betrayed him. He began coughing in early spring, a deep rattling sound that no medicine could ease. He lost weight, his cheeks hollowed, his hands trembled. The physician said it was a fever, then tuberculosis, then perhaps a divine test. By summer, his fingernails turned blue. He was 15. He died slowly, painfully. The procession was enormous, a vast train of nobles, clerics, soldiers, and servants marching behind the weight of his body, as if trying to carry not a man, but a regime. The coffin, too long delayed, too heavy, cracked during transport. It leaked onto the flagstones. One writer noted with cautious vagueness that the dogs licked the floor behind him. The servants who witnessed it said nothing. One might imagine them crossing themselves, or perhaps just looking away. He was buried beside Jane Seymour, the wife who had given him his son. She had lasted just long enough to die ideal. No grand monument was built. His tomb was left incomplete. The man who had reshaped England with iron and ink now lay beneath the earth in silence, but he never truly left, not entirely, because fear has a long half-life. His son Edward, sickly and pale, ruled briefly, always watched, always weighing his every gesture against what his father would have done. His daughter Mary ruled next. She tried to stitch the country back into Catholicism with a needle dipped in fire. Heretics burned, bishops wept, the people remembered the smell of their neighbours and turned their collars against the wind. Then came Elizabeth, the red-haired daughter of the beheaded queen. She ruled the longest, she smiled the widest, but she never married. Some said she loved England too much to share it. Others said she knew better than to trust anyone with a crown, having seen how easily heads rolled. In private, she kept her mother's ring. She never spoke of her father, but she kept his portraits clean. The court itself changed. The palaces echoed differently. No one argued with the monarch in public. Not anymore. They had learned that a sigh could become a trial, that a rumour could become a scaffold, that beneath the ermine and velvet there was always the possibility of blood. And the ulcer, though buried, lived on in metaphor. Every ruler, after Henry, ruled with one eye on the throne and the other on their own body, wondering when it too might turn against them. He had set the precedent. That power could be reshaped by force, that the church could be silenced, that love was negotiable, that law was optional, that kings did not need to be right, only louder. In the end, Henry VIII did not leave peace. He left inheritance of fear, of tradition twisted into power, of wounds that never quite healed. With Henry VIII's story closed like the lid of a cracked coffin, we now shift our gaze to another monarch whose reign was shaped not by ulcers or wives, but by whispers and silences, masks and fires. His son, Edward VI, the boy king. Edward was 9 when he became king. 9. An age when most children still believe in monsters under the bed. Edward was handed a crown heavy enough to snap the neck of a grown man. And in a way, it did. Just not his. He was the only legitimate son of Henry VIII, the child born of Jane Seymour, the wife who died before she could displease, England's long-awaited male heir, and as it turned out, its most fragile. Edward was thin, pale and clever. His tutors described him as brilliant. He could translate Latin before he had his second adult tooth. He took notes in Greek. He wrote essays on theology, and yet he was always distant, like a candle burning behind a sheet of glass. His court was not really his. Power belonged to the men around him. First his uncle, Edward Seymour, Lord Protector, and then John Dudley, Duke of Northumberland. They ruled in his name. They passed laws, reformed churches, burned books, beheaded rivals, and Edward wrote in his diary, brief entries, dry, unemotional. Today the Duke of Somerset was executed. He made a good end. That was all. He treated executions the way one might describe pruning a garden. Not cruel, just procedural. Like his father, he believed in order. Unlike his father, he believed in purity. Edward was a reformer. He tore down what little Catholicism remained. He banned altars, smashed stained glass, declared that priests must marry, must preach in English, must forget Rome entirely. He commissioned prayer books, full of plain words and plainer doctrines. He believed faith should be clean, and yet his own body betrayed him. He began coughing in early spring, a deep rattling sound that no medicine could ease. He lost weight. His cheeks hollowed, his hands trembled. The physicians said it was a fever, then tuberculosis, then perhaps a divine test. By summer, his fingernails turned blue. He was 15. He died slowly, painfully. He tried to write through it. His script grew shakier, his words thinner. When he realised he would not live, he panicked. He knew Mary, his Catholic half-sister, was next in line. He did not want her undoing his reforms, so he wrote a new will. He skipped Mary, he skipped Elizabeth. He named Lady Jane Grey his heir, a cousin, a Protestant. Jane was 16, shy, brilliant, horrified. She ruled for 9 days. Then Mary arrived with an army. Jane was imprisoned, and then, after some hesitation, beheaded. Edward's legacy was reduced to a footnote in a longer war. He had tried to save England, but England did not wish to be saved by a boy who coughed blood into silk handkerchiefs. He had reigned for 6 years, and when he died, his face was said to look peaceful, as if, finally, the doctrine in his bones had been freed. Mary Tudor, daughter of Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon, spent her youth being displaced, disinherited, downgraded from princess to lady. She watched as her father, once the golden, laughing monarch who lifted her onto his knee and called her his England, began to change. He grew quieter around her, less affectionate, more distant, until one day he stopped speaking to her at all. The silences spoke volumes. It began with the divorce, or rather, with the slow-motion dismantling of her mother's dignity. Catherine, born of Spanish royalty and married first to Henry's brother and then to Henry himself, refused to accept that she was anything but Queen of England. She would not step aside. She would not lie. When Henry demanded that she admit her marriage had been invalid, she looked him in the eye and quoted the Bible. Mary was 17. She watched the court split down the middle. Some whispered loyalty to Catherine. Others flocked to Anne Boleyn, the rising star, clever, fashionable, surrounded by musicians and foreign flatterers. Anne dressed in French styles. Anne laughed freely. Anne knew how to hold Henry's attention. Mary, dutiful and devout, became inconvenient. First, they changed how they addressed her. She was no longer Princess Mary in court documents, just the Lady Mary. A single word removed, like a button from a gown, but it changed the fit of everything. Next, they stripped her household. Her maids dismissed, her tutors silenced. The people who had raised her, those who knew her daily moods, her favourite psalms, the way she hummed when she embroidered, were sent away, one by one. No explanation, no ceremony. She was moved to smaller residences, farther from London, farther from the centre of power. Her letters were read before she received them. Her replies often never sent. She wrote to her father. She begged to see her mother. Both requests vanished into silence. Catherine was relocated to increasingly distant castles. When she became ill, Mary was forbidden to visit. When Catherine's health failed, the request to say goodbye was denied. When Catherine died, there was no summons, just a black ribbon on a servant's sleeve. Mary wore mourning clothes anyway, alone. Meanwhile, Anne Boleyn reigned in silks and pearls. She bore a daughter, Elizabeth. Henry rejoiced. He declared Elizabeth legitimate, and Mary not. Parliament passed an act stripping Mary of her place in the succession. She was a bastard now, legally, publicly, unavoidably. She was ordered to swear an oath accepting this. She refused. For months they pressured her. Her signature was the final piece they needed. Bishops came. Courtiers pleaded. One ambassador threatened. Still she refused, until she fell ill. And then the threats changed tone. Her servants were denied access. She was told the king would see her again, only if she signed. At last, weakened and isolated, she relented. She wrote her signature with a hand that shook. She renounced her claim. She admitted her mother had never been queen. They said it was a victory, but something in Mary changed, not broken, hardened. She became polite. Still, a model subject, but her letters grew colder, her smiles sharper. She no longer argued, but she never forgot. She became the still eye at the centre of the storm, ignored, underestimated, and quietly enduring. While others were executed, banished, disgraced, Mary watched and waited. When Anne Boleyn fell, charged with adultery, incest, treason, Mary said nothing. But in her chamber behind closed doors, she lit a candle for her mother. Mary waited, while her half-sister Elizabeth was celebrated in court masks and praised for her copper hair and quick tongue. Mary moved through draughty corridors, in borrowed dresses, surrounded by attendants, who dared not speak their minds. She had been set aside, but not fully erased when her father died in 1547. Mary was 31. Edward VI, her half-brother, became king at 9 years old. He was Protestant, she was not. She tried to keep her distance. She kept mass quietly, surrounded by aging retainers from her mother's household. Latin prayers whispered behind drawn curtains. Candles lit in secret. No fanfare, no scandal. Just faith clung to like a blanket in a winter palace. Edward's ministers were less tolerant. They sent her letters, then inspectors, then threats. She was not allowed to keep Catholic priests. She did anyway. She was not allowed to host mass. She did anyway. Once again, she was ordered to submit. Once again, she did not. When confronted, she said simply, "I obey my conscience first, and your laws second." Edward grew sicker. He began coughing blood. His fingers trembled when he signed orders. He tried to keep her from the throne. Named Jane Grey his heir, a girl even younger than Elizabeth, married off like a pawn and placed on the throne like a banner no one asked for. Mary rode out, not hiding, not weeping, but on horseback, surrounded by loyal households and armed gentlemen. She moved through East Anglia like a slow-rolling storm. The people came to her, old Catholics, angry Protestants, merchants tired of royal experiments. She raised her standard, and within days Jane Grey surrendered. Mary entered London not as a claimant, but as a queen. She was 37. Her shoulders were narrower now. Her hair was streaked with white. But her eyes, always too large for her face, burned with something unmistakable. Resolve. She had spent her life waiting for justice, and now she would serve it. She reversed Edward's reforms. Latin returned to the liturgy. The Pope returned to England. Bishops were replaced. Heresy trials reopened. She called it restoration. Others called it retribution. But to Mary it was personal. Her mother had died insisting she was queen. Mary would honour her with fire. To secure her reign, she needed a husband. And here things began to slide. Her advisers urged an English match, someone local, someone palatable. She refused. She wanted Philip of Spain, son of Charles V, a Habsburg, Catholic, regal, cold. Their marriage was arranged with dizzying speed. Few celebrated it, fewer trusted it. Philip arrived like a ship in fog, expected but unwelcome. He was handsome, in a pale, statuesque way. He wore black. He smiled rarely. He spoke little English. And from the moment he stepped onto English soil, he was watched. The wedding was performed in Latin. The people murmured. The bells rang, but the streets were lined with silence. Philip did not love Mary, and Mary, desperate for his affection, saw only duty where love should have been. She believed herself pregnant not long after the wedding. Her belly swelled, her breasts ached. She withdrew from court, preparing for a son who would seal the Catholic future of England. But months passed. No child came, just cramps, fever, a retreat into silence. It may have been a false pregnancy. It may have been a tumour. She did not speak of it. The court began to whisper. Philip returned to Spain, and Mary began to burn. The Marian persecutions began quietly. A few prominent heretics, a bishop here, a preacher there. She gave them a choice, recant or perish. Many did recant, but not all. The fires were built at Smithfield, then Oxford, then in market towns across the countryside. The condemned were tied to stakes with wet ropes. The wood was green, so the smoke was thick and choking. Sometimes they burned for hours. Sometimes they screamed scripture as their skin peeled. Sometimes they simply wept. Mary did not attend, but she knew their names. She read the transcripts. She believed she was saving their souls, that God demanded obedience, and mercy came through flame. She did not see herself as cruel. She saw herself as devout. The English people began to murmur, then to recoil, then to hate. The name Bloody Mary would not be used in her lifetime, but it would outlive her. And the firelight never really left the country. Mary aged rapidly. Her teeth blackened, her eyesight dimmed, her hair thinned in clumps. The second false pregnancy, the second hope turned horror, left her hollow. Philip visited again, briefly. He asked for money, troops. He kissed her hand, and left again. When she died in 1558, she was 42. There was no child, no triumph, only fever and a whisper. She called out for her mother, and then for Philip, and then for God. No one answered. Mary was dead. No bells yet, no official declaration, just a shift in the air. A stillness outside her chambers, then the sound of horses, boots, a knock, and a man, pale and breathless, kneeling before a woman and saying words she'd rehearsed in dreams and nightmares. Your Majesty. Elizabeth, daughter of Anne Boleyn, and the man who had beheaded her, was Queen. At 25, she'd spent her life in the shadows of succession. Born royal, then declared illegitimate, flattered, then watched, imprisoned, then released. She had spent time in the Tower, where the stones remember screams, and walked out of it alive. That fact alone felt like a kind of anointing. When she entered London, the streets erupted. After years of burning, of fear, of foreign kings and false pregnancies, the people wanted something else. And Elizabeth gave them exactly that. Not purity, not warmth, but balance. Her face became the symbol of the age, pale, immaculate, designed. She painted herself white with ceruse, a poisonous lead mixture that ate the skin beneath. Her hair was red, always red, even when the roots said otherwise. Her ruff framed her head like a sunburst. Her voice was measured, never shrill, never trembling. She became an image before she became a monarch, and that was intentional. Images do not bleed, images do not marry, and she would not. They asked her constantly. Parliament begged, ambassadors hinted, suitors wrote poetry, but Elizabeth had seen what marriage did to queens. Her mother? Seduced, crowned, accused, beheaded. Her cousin Jane ruled for 9 days, executed. Her sister Mary, humiliated, abandoned, made monstrous by her womb. Elizabeth would rule alone. She married England, symbolically, of course, but she wore that symbol like armour. She was Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, the unmothered mother of the nation. She had portraits painted with eyes on her dress and ears on her sleeves. I see all, they said. I hear all. And people believed it. Not because she was everywhere, but because she might be. She re-established the Church of England, but carefully. Not too Protestant, not too Catholic. Her Book of Common Prayer walked a tightrope. Her bishops wore robes plain enough for Puritans and ornate enough for bishops. She cracked down on dissent, quietly, precisely. Her spies were everywhere. Men were arrested for things they hadn't said yet. Elizabeth reigned from a desk. Not literally. She had courts, privy councils, and progresses, but her true power lay in her control over paper. Letters, edicts, signatures withheld, promises delayed. She read everything, wrote much herself. Nothing was decided quickly. Her motto, video et tateo, I see and say nothing, was not a clever phrase. It was a policy. Marriage proposals continued. The Archduke Charles, the Duc d'Alençon, Philip of Spain, her dead sister's husband, even offered again. She flirted, teased, negotiated, and evaded them all. One moment warm, the next unreachable. It was not indecision, it was strategy. As long as she remained unmarried, every court in Europe had reason to keep speaking to her. She turned her singlehood into international policy. Meanwhile, her image hardened into myth. Painters were instructed to follow strict rules. No wrinkles, no shadows, no signs of time. In one portrait, she stands upon a globe. In another, her gown is embroidered with eyes and ears. She's always upright, always glowing. She's not depicted as she was, but as the realm needed her to appear. But beneath the pearl-stiff bodice, she was aging. Her teeth blackened. Her temper, once playful, turned severe. She grew jealous of younger women, particularly her ladies-in-waiting. She flew into rages when they married without her permission. And yet she inspired fierce loyalty. Her advisors, men like William Cecil, Francis Walsingham, and later the impetuous Robert Devereux, worked under constant pressure, never quite sure when her favour would turn. She praised sparingly, punished slowly but thoroughly, and still they served her. Because to disappoint Elizabeth was not just to risk exile or disgrace, it was to lose the light of the court itself. She made men feel seen, and then reminded them, often subtly, that she could also make them invisible. Plots swirled,